welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges again today, and I have another wonderful interview for you. Sometimes I take breaks, and then sometimes God just pours wonderful people into my life that I get to share with you. At a book event, an author event at our library this year, I met really neat author named Ingrid Brown. And Ingrid and I got to talking because, we had some things in common. And she had written a really neat book. And the more we got to talking, the more I realized what she had to share is what a couple of my friends are going through. And I bet there's more of you out there. So I thought, we might want to bring Ingrid on to help us out, make life a little easier. Ingrid, thank you so much for being with us today. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
inviting
it.
me.
I like that picture on your wall.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love it.
Yes, I like being reminded about Jesus literally being right here with a bunch of friends, hanging out and giving such wisdom that the impact of those dinners, right, especially that Last Supper,
That last
has pervaded our world for centuries now. Wonderful. So you are an author. And you also have a website to as with like a blog for helping people deal with life as a caregiver, specifically for people with Alzheimer's. Can
yes.
you tell me what got you started in that direction?
Okay. Yes, the blog that I have is on Medium, and it has to do with caregiving and caregiving with for people who have Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. My mother had
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, and I was her sole caregiver for many years. And then when my son was old enough, he began to help me a great deal, as did one of my cousins. In recent years, I have been on the board of a program that works with Alzheimer's, and it's called ADOS. It's Alzheimer's Diversity Outreach Services. And one of the things I've done with that particular group is I facilitate a support group. And the support group is
Wow.
for caregivers of people who have loved ones with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. And I began to think about some of the issues that we discuss
Yeah.
during our group meetings. And I thought about all of the people that are struggling with this particular situation. And I decided that maybe I could reach a few more people if I did a blog. I started that just a couple of months ago.
One thing I have found, actually, two things I found, is number one, it really helps to have a place where you can talk, right? And the modern technology has given us more ability to just talk out our own experiences, which is so therapeutic. But it also really helps if you can connect with people who understand where you're coming from, who've been there. And um, I wish that there was a support group in every neighborhood,
Yeah.
but when there's not, being able to go to a blog to read, that you're not alone, that there's other people out there with the same experiences or similar experiences, can make you feel a little better, right? A little less like you're just trapped inside of a dream.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because when I was a caregiver for my mother, um, I wasn't a part of a support group, and I wasn't aware of some of the resources that are available. And I really felt as if I was in a vacuum. I felt that nobody had ever gone through what I was going through, and I tend to be a really private person anyway. So I would give. Sometimes I would give people a little bit of information, but I never really talked about everything that I was going through. And one of the reasons that I didn't do that is because when I would attempt to share, I realized very quickly that other folks don't understand. They just don't understand, and they would the responses weren't helpful. They just weren't helpful. And one of the things, of course, that I see with doing support groups, and I've done support groups off and on for probably 20 years now, is that it gives you a place to talk about the experiences that you're having, the behavior that you're seeing, the changes in behavior that can be just traumatic. It's just traumatic
Yeah.
to watch your loved one change from a very capable person to a person who needs help with almost everything. And what happens with that is that people would I give information. Part of the group is educational, so I do some teaching. But I think the most helpful part is sharing. And at the beginning, when I um, first started a support group, and we've had sessions for maybe 3 or 4 months or whatever. During that time, most of the session is crying. It's just crying, and it's crying because of the situation, because it's very depressing. But then I think
Yeah.
sometimes they're tears of joy because somebody finally understands. Somebody really understands what I'm saying. So we have that element, and then of course it gives them a sense of freedom to be able to say whatever's on their mind. Sometimes you have thoughts that you believe are not acceptable. As
Mm,
example, I've had a couple of people who have just stated, "It's time for this to be over. It's time for this
yeah.
to be over." And there are very few places that you can make that kind of statement and have it accepted and understood. Yeah,
I can see that. And one of the things that I've noticed is, I mean, I've known the sweetest human beings on the face of the earth to be in a situation where they're caring for someone, and it becomes so draining, and you can't ever stop, right?
yeah,
And you end up so angry
yeah,
sometimes, especially when things happen that not only are you taking care of this person, but now you have to replace something they've broken or lost, or you know or now you have to fix a mess that's happened because someone who literally taught you how to live is
yeah,
now incapable of
yeah.
good decision making.
Exactly.
And there's some real anger that comes out, but I don't think anybody wants to feel that way, right? um, but we just can't help it sometimes. And it helps to have a place where people understand that
Exactly.
just because
Hmm.
you're expressing things that aren't socially acceptable, right, doesn't mean that you're a horrible person. It's an
Exactly.
expression of what is piling up on you, and
Yeah.
your need to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true for sure. But first of all, let me say that sometimes when a person has the thought that I just
Mhm.
shared with you, sometimes that comes from a place of it being so difficult to watch your loved one suffer the way that they are. Sometimes
True.
the thought is for you, but it's also for the other person. That this is not what they would choose for their life. To be in that kind of situation. But when we speak about anger, the anger has many. I don't want to say it comes from many places. I'll just say
Yeah.
that it comes from first of all, you're tired. You're really
Right.
tired.
Even a 3-year-old gets cranky when they're tired.
And you're sleep deprived. You're dealing with situations that are very difficult because one of the things that one of my friends and I talked about during the time that both of our parents were suffering with Alzheimer's is that I'm glad that you brought up a 3-year-old, or maybe not 3-year-old, but maybe someone who's 18 months old. If you if you're in a situation where you have an 18-month-old that is just really running around and getting into stuff, and you've got other things to do, you can pick him up and put him in a playpen. But you can't
True.
pick up your mother and put her in a place
This is
in a
true.
playpen. So I think some of the anger comes from the fact that that people are just tired. I think it comes from a
Yeah,
place of not really understanding what the disease is like. It comes from a place of knowing that your loved one is not going to remember a statement that you've made 2 minutes later. But then when they ask you again, it's like, don't you ask me that again? But they really don't remember, And it also comes
yeah,
from a place of not understanding or not wanting to accept that reasoning ability and skills that they've had, they just don't have anymore. Those are hard. Those are hard
right,
things to accept. And then the other part of the anger is that people who are on the outside have a tendency to be very critical. Sometimes they feel as if, you know, well, they don't. First of all, they don't understand, so they
mhm,
will have expectations that are totally
right,
unreasonable. And
yeah,
every once in a while, that anger, you're already angry, you're already frustrated, you're already at a breaking point. And then when someone says something to you that's totally inappropriate, sometimes they get to be the target. They get,
right. People get upset with you for being late or for not being around, when in reality, they have the ability to show up at your house and say, "Hey, let me take care of your mom for a little while so you can go out
yeah,
anywhere
yeah,
besides
yeah,
here." And,
yeah,
and I think sometimes we need to show up for
yeah,
people instead of
yeah.
giving them a hard time.
Because
Yeah.
really that gives you another level of understanding. I can remember years ago when I was doing a support group, and there were many people who were the caregivers, and they were saying that other family members didn't understand, and they were critical and so forth and so on. So the suggestion that was made is to call them and tell them that you've got an appointment and ask them to come over and stay for an hour or whatever length of time you need, and when you come back, have a conversation. And most of the time, well, I can one time in particular, I remember a lady who was at the point of wanting uh, a long-term care placement for her husband, and her children was just adamantly against that. And she had one of the girls
Yeah.
stay with her dad for a couple of hours. And when she came back, the daughter met her at the door and said, "I support whatever decision you make." And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
really?
Right. Let's get some understanding now. Yeah. Well, and honestly, I tell you what, I just have to dwell on that for a second, because
Mhm.
I love the idea that you don't have to wait for someone else to show up and offer. You can't, I mean, people want to know how to be supportive and they don't. They really don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And when you say, "Hey, I have an appointment. Can you come over and just watch TV with whoever this is, my mom, my dad, whatever, for an hour?" I mean, your appointment doesn't have to be a doctor's appointment,
Mhm.
right? Your appointment could be at the hair salon or at the park where you sit with God for an hour and go, "This is
Yeah.
BS."
Yeah.
you know, I love that you can actively ask, but you're right. People do have wrong expectations sometimes, and they put even more pressure on a caregiver. And you had told me when we talked before, you told me about a situation where we're not dealing with an 18-month-old, right? We're dealing with someone who's had skills all their lives. They've
Exactly.
been cooking and they've been driving and they've been taking care of themselves all their lives, and now they're losing the ability, but they don't know that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And your mom drove somewhere
Yes.
and lost her car. Is that
Yes, she
right?
did. Yes, she did.
Tell me about this. So, how did this transpire? How did that resolve?
Uh, well, It was a very frightening situation because
Yeah.
anything could have happened with her. Um, it was, I don't even have the words right now to describe it, but actually what happened is
Mhm.
when I got off work, she didn't have a car. She didn't have a car, and she just said, I left my car someplace, let's go get it. It's like, well, where? Do you have any idea where? But and she didn't. So it took us, my cousin and I, a month to find the car. And what happened is that she had gone downtown. I guess she told me she went to pay a bill. So we drove and we looked for I don't know how long, on a daily basis for a long time. I called the police. I know that they would not take time to look for the car, but I just wanted to give them the information, hoping that if they happened to see the car, they would let me know and I could just go and pick
Right?
it up. But instead, I was reprimanded. He told me that my mother needed total supervision, and if I didn't provide the supervision, that they were going to call Adult Protective Services and report me. Had that kind of situation. So we just continued to look for the car, and finally, my cousin got up one morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and went downtown and drove around, and she found the car in a parking lot that was probably 2 or 3 miles from where my mother told me she went. So we were able
Wow.
to get the car, but it was so frustrating because we didn't have any answers. First of all, I don't know how she got there. I don't know how and she did pay that bill. I went and I found out that she did pay the bill. So I don't know how she got from where she parked the car to the city hall to pay her water bill. I don't know how she got home. And those things are frightening. Those are things that cause you to lose sleep. You can't even sleep because you never know what's going on. And that was basically not that particular incident, but the reason that I made the decision of long-term care for my mother is because even after my son agreed to move in with her, we couldn't keep up with her. He would wake up and she would be gone. We couldn't keep up with her. Yeah,
Yeah. When you're used to running things, right? You've raised kids, you've had your own home,
yeah,
done all the things. And when you're used to running things and you don't know that you can't anymore,
yeah,
that creates dangers.
yes,
I am
mhm,
so grateful that that car wasn't impounded. A lot of places, that car would have disappeared. You would end up paying more for impound charges and storage
yeah,
than the car was probably worth. And a month of that had to have been just very, very stressful.
yeah.
And
Well,
I know that you didn't want originally, you never wanted to not be able to take care of her at home.
yeah,
But as even after your son moved in, like you said, you realized that maybe it was time.
yes, yes. First of all, let me say this. When we after we
Yeah.
found the car, we sold the car.
Mhm. Yes,
We
ma'am.
just sold it. So it's like we're not doing this twice. We will not. This is what we will not
Nope.
do.
I think I'm probably going to get one of those little pet tags and stick it in my car so that I can always find my car. Because now I'm thinking, I get lost coming out of the mall.
Well, I do too. I do too. And then I try to discreetly use my clicker so that I can see some lights or whatever, so I know where it is. I do that. But yes, getting back to the issue of long-term care, no, I did not want to do that. But what the decision was not entirely mine. My mother got to the point where she stopped eating. She would just forget. She would forget to eat. And then when we would try to coax her, she didn't like that. She just didn't want to eat. So she ended up in the hospital, and she was, for whatever reason, she became extremely disoriented in the hospital and had to have a 24-hour sitter. They had to have someone in the hospital room with her for 24 hours a day while she was a patient there. And so the doctor just told me that she can't go home. She cannot go back home. And I did have forethought, so I had looked at facilities, so I knew which one I was most comfortable with. So I went to them and made arrangements. So when she was discharged from the hospital, I took her to the facility, and it was it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. Even though it's been years ago, when I think back on it, I've had very few things that have been that difficult. But as you said, God is always He's always in the mix. And over the years, we had talked a lot, and she would always say that she never wanted to be in a facility. She never wanted to do that. So I didn't know. At the hospital, they offered to transport her for me, but I didn't want that. I wanted to take her myself. So when I went to the hospital, I told her that she wasn't going home, that she was going to another place, and she would stay there, and that I would visit her on a regular day, but she wasn't going to go back home. And she looked at me, and she said, "Am I going to eat there?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Will I sleep there?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "I'll have my own bed." And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Okay, let's go." And I said, "Oh my God!" But
Oh, that's
even
wonderful.
so, it was still really, really hard for me to leave her there. But it turned out to be one of the best things that happened. Because she had gotten down to 76 pounds. She weighed 76
Oof,
pounds, and her regular weight was like 125. And
oof,
very shortly after she was admitted, she was back up to her normal weight. So and it was she was much more comfortable, being there, because she didn't have to try to make decisions and figure out things that as you said, she used to know how to do. It was much less stressful for me, for my son, and even for my cousin. So it was the right
yeah.
decision for us, for sure.
And I just have to say something. I think we all get nobody wants to end up in a nursing home, right?
Mhm.
We all of us like having our own space. We like having our own independence. We get a little nervous about places where everybody is unhealthy and you know maybe losing their memory or whatever, and we don't have freedom.
Mhm.
But two things come to mind. One, God is always with us everywhere we go,
Mhm.
and we can choose our attitude. We can choose to be the patient the nurses are glad to see, to
Yeah.
be the person that other residents, that brings a smile to the other residents. We
Mhm.
can choose that knowing that we are not alone and these bodies aren't permanent, but
Yeah.
wherever God puts us while we're in these bodies, He's got a plan for us. He has a purpose, and He's taking care of us. And, sometimes you have to think about the fact that He has actually anointed people to be caregivers in places like that where they have multiple people a day who can take care of somebody. When you've got a family member doing everything they can in their home, they have to sleep sometime.
Yes.
They have to go to the bathroom. They have to
Yeah.
work. They have to, you
Yeah.
can't expect somebody, even a small family, you can't expect a family to be able to be there multiple shifts a day and to recognize things that are going wrong that they're not trained to recognize. So, and
Especially with a
it
small
takes,
family, because the small family, well, like with it's my family, it's very small, so it was just me. It was just me.
yeah,
So yeah, it's impossible. You just
yeah.
can't. But you feel as if
But
you have
she
to.
had You were still a partner with the caregivers, though. At once she was at the nursing home, you didn't go, okay, I'm going to Hawaii, right? I mean,
No, no.
you still showed up and made sure that they knew what was normal for your mom and what wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah, and
yeah,
I agree with your statement that, that some people are caregivers, and that's their profession and so forth. But I would caution anyone who does decide to do a placement for their parent to be very, or their loved one to be very present, to be very
Yes.
present, because things do happen. Things happen in facilities, and sometimes your person will receive better care if they know for sure that you're going to be there all of the time. And I was there basically on a daily basis, not the same time every day, not the same shift, but I was in the building almost every day.
Yeah. And that really does make a difference. Plus, you know what's normal.
Yeah.
When my grandparents were in a nursing home, you know, when grandpa acted weird, I mean, like really not him, the people who work there didn't know that that wasn't him because they saw other people act like that.
Hmm.
And so I could say, wait, this is not normal for him. Something is wrong. And they
Yes.
were able to identify that he had a UTI,
Y-
and that,
Yeah.
he was just not right because of the toxicity. So little things like that. Plus, I think your people get a little more respect if you're
Exactly.
around,
They do.
not trying to boss everybody around, but being present. You show somebody
Exactly.
love, other people want to love them too.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I would advise or caution anyone to do that. Don't feel as if you're off the hook, because you still need to be very, very present, to assure
Yeah.
that your person is well cared for. Yeah.
And once somebody is in, and if you actually choose to put your loved one in a nursing home or in a care center, um, is everything better? No longer need support? I mean, are you able to just go on with your life like nothing ever happened, or do you think there's still some healing that needs to take place?
Oh, of course, there's healing. In fact, the support group that I facilitate now
Mhm.
is of a group of caregivers whose loved one is in a facility.
Yeah.
Uh, all of their in this group, everybody's loved one is in that facility. But no, that doesn't diminish. I mean, it diminishes the physical pressure, but the emotional
Hmm.
pressure, so forth and so on, is still there. It's still there. And
Yeah.
sometimes one of the first things that they have to deal with is guilt, the guilt of
Yeah.
having made that decision. So no, it doesn't end because your person is not in the home anymore. It continues.
Yeah. And that can take a while. There's grief that goes along with that, right? And
Exactly.
I mean, things don't normally turn around when someone reaches that point. They can slow down. There are health things that we can do to help slow the process of Alzheimer's, but you know, at some point we have to say goodbye to people, and there's a grieving process. So it's wonderful that you do this support group and that you have your blog to help people feel understood. If somebody
Let,
wanted to be
let,
involved in
let
this,
me respond
oh,
to
go
that.
ahead.
Let me respond to that.
Yeah.
When you speak about grief, there's something called ambiguous grief, and that is one of the things that people who have loved ones who have dementia experience,
Hmm.
because um, when we speak in terms of grief, when a person passes away, that's final. That's final. So
Right.
you go through a grieving process so far as that's concerned, and it can last for a long time. Everybody is different, and you can go back and forth between the stages. But and if you have a person who's physically ill, that's a grieving process, because you
Hmm.
don't have that helpmate anymore. You don't, their person is not able to engage in social activities as they have been before. And that is a form of grief. But when you speak in terms of someone who has dementia, that's a totally different thing, because it's a situation where the person is very present, but not. And
Yeah.
that is something that's extremely difficult to get accustomed to. So basically what you have is a person who is continuously becoming someone else, someone that you don't know. And it happens in stages. So when you get used to this person, and then they become someone else. And it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult
Yeah.
because the person is there. but they're not there. I can remember having a conversation with one of my cousins once, and her mother had passed away, and she, just made the statement. She just said, "I really miss my mother," and I looked at her and I said, "I miss mine too."
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder when my grandparents passed, and they didn't have, my grandpa was forgetful, but he still knew me and stuff. I mean, they weren't, neither of them had Alzheimer's, but when they were gone and my dad was gone and my uncle was gone, it was basically, I felt like everybody who knew a certain part of me, everybody who was there
Hmm.
during certain parts of my life were gone. And it almost felt like there were holes in my history. Like nobody knew about those parts of my life. So, that those summers that we had all spent together, things like that. So it was
Yeah,
like they were gone.
yeah,
Those parts of my history were gone.
yeah.
And obviously, I mean, I know now, and I knew in my head then, even though I didn't feel it, but I knew, those are still my memories. I still got to hold on to those. But did you
Mhm.
feel a little bit of a gap in your own identity growing when your mom couldn't remember
Yeah.
your childhood?
Yeah,
Mom
for
couldn't
sure,
remember those
for
things.
sure. Yeah, I certainly did, and it's a different kind of experience because I felt those same kinds of things when my father passed away. But as I said, during the time that I was a caregiver for my mother, I had those losses, but her
Yeah,
body was still here. So it's a totally
right.
different kind of situation. Yeah.
And in most relationships, we're constantly growing closer to one another. And in this type of situation, you're getting kind of further apart as
No,
you,
you're getting closer.
the
You're
longer it
getting
goes.
closer because the further they are into the process, the more you need to be with it. It's like tending to a baby. You wouldn't
Ah, the
leave
more
a baby by
dependence.
themselves. So
Yeah, okay. Well,
you're
that's
closer,
that's
but
good.
it's just different. It's totally
Yeah.
different than what you were accustomed to. And then with my mother, for a long time, when I would get to the point where I would say, "Well, we need to do this or we need to do that," she'd say, "I'm the mama." you know.
I I can totally
So
see my
it took a
mom and my
long time for
grandma
her to
both
forget
saying
that. I mean, she forgot some other things, but she remembered that. so,
that. Oh, how funny.
oh
How funny.
yeah.
So, if somebody needed to get involved in a support group, you said it was ADOS, ADOS,
Hmm.
is the organization that you're with.
Hmm.
Would they be able to go there and find local support groups that are close to them?
Yes, yes, they can. I don't. I didn't do the website, but yes, you could Google. You could just Google ADOS, or
Mhm.
the title is Alzheimer's Diversity Outreach Services, and you can contact them, and they can not only refer you to support groups, but they can do consultations, and they can refer you to other resources as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I
Hmm.
know physically being in a same room with people really helps. Just having that an environment where you're right in front of people. But sometimes that's
Hmm.
not possible. And
Hmm.
from what you were telling me before, I think they do actually have Zoom groups. Is that right? Or virtual? Or
Well,
maybe it's not
I think
them necessarily.
yeah, when I talked about the Zoom groups, those were other things that I'm involved in. But
Oh,
there are
okay.
other situations. I'm a member now of a Facebook group, and I'm sorry I can't
Yeah,
tell you the name of it, but
that's okay.
and they communicate with each other and offer advice, support, and so forth and so on. And it's worldwide. There are people from different
Good.
states in America. There are a lot of people from UK. So it's worldwide. So you can do that
Yeah.
kind of support. And then we have in that particular group, we have some people that don't want to be identified. So
Right.
their title or whatever is unknown. When it comes up, doesn't have a picture, it just says unknown. And sometimes they don't even tell you where they are. But you can still get some support if you go to Facebook or other social media and disconnect with any group
Yeah.
that will help you get that support, because I think that that's just one of the most important things, because I believe me when I tell you that regardless of how supportive or knowledgeable your friends and family would like to be, they just don't know.
Right.
In fact,
Right.
in recent years, I've had a few relatives and several friends who have called me and said, "You remember when you were taking care of your mother and I told you I understood?" And I'd say yes, and they'd say I didn't, because now they're in that
Hmm.
situation, and they know now
Right.
that they had no clue. They had no clue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're in a social media support group, just a word of caution, um, if somebody tries to send you a link, the government's funding this and click here to get your
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just look it up separately.
Exactly.
Thank them for the information. Look it up separately. Don't click the links. Don't
Exactly.
engage with people you don't know who try to
Exactly.
sell you the moon, right? But yeah, don't be alone. Don't you get support. Now, I want to shift gears for just
Okay.
a minute here,
Okay.
and I want to hear, Ingrid, about your book because after this was all over, um, and you were ready to kind of reclaim your life, you started writing mysteries. It was mystery? No,
Well,
novel.
I have I have two books, and the first one is a mystery, and it's called Village
I thought
Vengeance,
so. Okay, I'm
and
looking
it's
at this going, wait, this
yeah,
isn't a mystery, but okay, you
yeah,
did
and
do a
it's
mystery.
based on actual events,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and it's, as a matter of fact, I published that shortly after my mother passed away. Um, and then the next book that I have is a romantic, a historical romance, and it's called Miss
Mm-hmm.
Sadie's Song, and it is based on, it's fictional. It is based on an actual
Mm-hmm.
character, but it's fictional, and it was birthed because Miss Sadie in Village
Yeah.
Vengeance, she was known as Aunt Sadie. And when I would go out to support, to promote Village Vengeance, someone would always say, "Tell us more about Aunt Sadie. We want to know about Aunt Sadie." So I wrote a book about Aunt Sadie, and I called her Miss Sadie. As I said, and it's a historical mystery. A historical fiction, I should say. It
Mm-hmm.
begins in the 20s, and it ends in the 70s. Okay. It's a
Wow.
historical romance is what it is. Yeah. And yeah,
Uh-huh.
and it's good. It's good. I think so. So it tells
I
people
think
everything
it's
they want
just
to know about Aunt Sadie. But now it's really interesting because Aunt Sadie was married to Joe. So now people are saying, "I'm so sick of Joe." So I have said that I would write a book called Joe and tell his story, and I haven't done it. I just haven't done that.
well, that's all right. I'm looking forward to it though.
Yeah.
But Miss Katie's song, it just sweep you off your feet. There's something about it's funny because she's 16 in the book and she ends up a bride. But back in the 20s, that actually did happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, I realize I'm 52, but there are parts of me that still feel 16, right?
Yeah.
And so you read something like this and you're like totally back in that, those young, like designing your dream life kind of
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So I think that's really neat that you wrote that. And I have a couple of fiction books that I've started, and fiction is just not my forte. I enjoy it. It's a leisure activity for me, to
Yeah.
write fiction. And I can tell you how, to put things together, but I never finish things when it comes
Oh,
to fiction.
yeah.
I love that you actually went all the way through it twice.
Yeah.
Good for
Well,
you.
I did. I did. Yeah.
How neat. Well, if you had something to share with someone right now who's just going through this process, to give them a little hope or a little practical advice, is there one little nugget that you might share?
Okay. Okay. I think the most important information that I could share is self-care.
Mhm.
With
Yeah.
everything that has to be done, self-care is probably the most important duty that you have.
Mm.
It's not selfish,
No.
because you cannot care for someone else if you aren't healthy. And that again
Yeah.
is one of the issues that I had, because I felt as if, even though I was doing most of the things by myself until my son was old enough to help me, and my cousin, began to help me, I felt as if I just had to do that. I had to do that because it had to be done and there was nobody else to do it. So I just had to until I found myself on
Yeah.
an emergency room floor. And then I thought,
Oof.
well, I need to back off and figure out a way to get these things done without sacrificing myself. Because the
Yeah.
question that I posed to myself that helped me give myself permission is, you're really concerned that your mother doesn't have anybody else to take care of her. Who's going to take care of her if you drop dead? Who's going to do it?
Right.
So
Which unfortunately
yeah,
happens.
it
Yeah.
does happen. It does happen. I've worked in them, and I'm a social worker, a retired social worker,
Mhm.
and I've worked in the health profession for many years, and I have seen numerous caregivers die before the patient. So self-care
Yeah.
is not a luxury; it's mandatory.
Yeah. And let's talk about self-care for just a moment, because self-care, when you're taking care of someone full time, self-care does not look like what you might imagine it looks like. Um, this is sometimes we have bigger expectations, and they're constantly being frustrated because we don't have that kind of time or that kind of capacity. And we have to recognize that, we give ourselves a little bit of a break, right? But we think about the primary things: movement. You need movement and sunshine. You need somebody to talk to once in a while who is outside of the situation. And you need some kind of creativity or something that gets your brain going, right? And reminds you that there's, life beyond this. And you need that spiritual time. You need some connection with God, some kind of a refilling with worship, with, you know, whether it's going to church or listening to worship music, spending that time with God. And that's got to be a daily thing, I would think, just to get through this. But find the key things. What is going to keep me alive and able and um, mentally kind of unchain me from this situation a little bit, loose those chains a little bit mentally, um, and find a few of those things to insert in your life. This doesn't mean you're going to write your novel while you're taking care of somebody, right? But
Yeah.
this might mean that once a week you sit down for an hour with a great smelling tea and you write a little bit and let your mind wander, because it's important to you to write or color or garden or, whatever. So, may not, it shouldn't be another pressure thing to put on yourself, but it should definitely be something that keeps you live, actually encourages your life. I found that sometimes self-care feels like it should involve a lot of ice cream and cookies.
Yeah,
Right?
really could.
Give me a
It
whole
could.
pizza. Right? That's not actually going to do you the most good. Self-care feels sometimes like yeah, I'm going to go to bed and just sleep for 15 hours, because I'm exhausted. And yes, I love naps. Everybody who knows me knows I love naps, but and you do need plenty of rest, but that's not always the best way to use if you have a little extra time. Sometimes it helps instead to give your mind something to do, or feel a connection with someone you haven't talked to in a while.
Okay. Okay, that yeah, I agree with everything that you've just said.
Yeah.
One key to self care is to
Yeah.
have information about resources. Okay, because there are
Yeah.
resources for respite, so that you can maybe have someone that will relieve you. If you don't have friends or family that can do it, you can, if you can sign up for respite care. Sometimes that can be for a couple of hours, and sometimes it could be as long as a weekend. You might be able to take your loved one someplace for a weekend, or sometimes even a longer period than that. Years and years and years ago, when I worked with the school system in Wichita, we had a respite program, and there was a lady who had a 3-year-old, and then she had a baby that was born with special needs, who was, was all just
Mm.
cried almost constantly. And her
Aw.
need for respite was for someone to come in so that she could take a bath. That's all she wanted. She just wanted to take a bath, and that was
Yeah.
her rest. That was her self care. So it comes in all
What a
forms.
beautiful thing,
Yeah,
right?
all
Yeah.
forms.
Oh, I'm so glad that is available, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot
Yeah,
that that even
yeah,
existed.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. You've been such a pleasure to talk to. Ingrid,
Thank
I'm so
you.
glad we met.
Thank you. Can I give you
So
my blog
yeah,
contact? Okay, you can find the blog
absolutely.
at Arthur Ingrid Brown at medium.com.
Author ingridbrown.medium.com. And I'm going to put this in the
At
comments as
medium.com.
well.
It's at medium.com. Yes. Okay.
Mhm. And I will put that in the comments as well. Um, and I don't know, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I think that's it. I think I've covered everything that we talked about.
Mm. Sometimes self care involves reading a sweet little romance novel called Miss Sadie's Song. Just saying.
Exactly. Exactly.
I honestly, it's funny.
Uh,
I'll notice sometimes I'm getting a little bit irritable because, I'm going too much and doing too many have tos. And I have to sit down with like just a cozy book or some kind of fiction to just let my mind go for a couple of nights. And then I'm ready to get started again. So
mhm.
I'm actually
Yeah.
not kidding
Yeah.
about that. Wonderful. Well, let's pray for our listeners.
Okay.
Lord, thank you so much. Thank you so much for reminding us we are not alone. We have you, and we have other people who get it. God, I ask that for people right now who are scared, who are tired, who are feeling like this is endless, who are hurting, maybe even angry, that you would bring your peace, that your Holy Spirit would just wash over their minds and their hearts and their bodies in this moment. And that they would be able to relax into worship for you and into refreshing from you. And that you would lead them to the resources, or just bring the resources right into their lives, God, and help them to be okay with whatever it is that they need to do to walk in wisdom and to take care of this person that you've given them. In Jesus' name. Lord, bring a cure. We ask for your healing, and we ask for scientific wisdom. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, God bless you. I will see everybody next time. And I'll put Ingrid's information in the comments. Let her know how you like her book. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's done.